Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Rabbi Address. Thank you so much for being here again with us. I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Okay. All right. Boker Tov, everybody. I hope everybody, well, he's Boker Tov where you all are, but it's just noon here on the East Coast, with the feel-good temperatures in the 100s. Everybody's like getting ready to sacrifice to the gods of weather. Um, but anyway, we have, you're all right, Saroni. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So, um, So we have this really bizarre Torah portion today, that has bothered Jews for centuries. And of course, being Torah, there's some you don't have to look hard to find some interesting parallels to July 2024. So we will begin, and I hope all of you got the email from Sherry and have done your homework, and have you read through Parashat Korach, because you will be tested on this in a very few amount of moments. And oh, it's very uncomfortable sitting, but to appease everybody, let us do the blessing for the study of Torah. Everybody, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're going to ask this portion to, as we do every time I'm with you, to la'asok us, to speak to us. First of all, this is from the book of Numbers. It is a later book in the Torah, as you know. It's a compilation of the story of the wanderings, and there are traditional themes here, uh, not the least of which is Moses and Aaron doing everything they could possibly do for this group of people who find any excuse at all to say, it's not enough. It's not enough. You should be doing more. Yeah. So the riffraff or stiff-necked people, as they are sometimes called in this book, proliferate. There's some ethical and moral issues here, but we begin with the rebellion of Korach. Is a fascinating. I can't trying to figure out why all of your the top row of my gallery view is like half.
Hmm.
Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it because I had to go to the Apple store yesterday and talk to one of the geniuses, and he started to rabble on and ramble on about this, that, and everything. I said, could you just dumb it down? Just dumb it down so that even I can understand it, which he laughed and giggled, and then he did. He was really nice. And then his phone did something. He pushed a button, and his phone talked to my phone.
Mm.
It's very frightening what's going on. But anyway, I digress, as most of us rabbis do. We have a class in that at the seminary. Um, I had half and then clicked on OK. All right, John, I don't even know. Oh, clicked on OK. All right, John Babes, you're a genius. Um, rock and roll heaven. The rebellion of Korach. Okay, so if you go to the beginning, if those of you who have the Torah with you, either a Plout or an Etz Chaim or a Art Scroll or whatever Torah commentary that you may be using, I hope you have them because you will be tested today. Korach, the son of Ishar, the son of Levi, and remember that immediately identifies Korach as a Levite. And a Levite is the priestly class, which at the end of this Torah portion is going to be validated and reestablished. So point number one, you can possibly read into this Torah portion another attempt. Remember, the Torah is a priestly book. It was compiled post-exilic by the priestly class to underwrite their authority. Point two, always remember that when you look at Torah, especially the non prehistory chapters, which is Genesis 1 to Genesis 11. You can always teach this as political science. It's a fascinating thing. We rarely do that, but but a lot of us have been around the block a little bit. You can read into that. This is one of those passages. So it is possible to read into this another text that underscores the validity and power of the priestly class over the people, which is exactly what's happening. So Korach is from the Levites, along with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Elab, and the son of Pelach. He comes in, he has another starring role later on. Descendants of Reuben. So they're part of the group here to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community chosen in an assembly. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, this is your first test. You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and God is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation? Okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? Is this jealousy? Is it envy? Is it why did God choose you? I'm a populist. Why are you separating yourself from you're an elitist. You're an elitist. Can't be an elitist. What's going on here? And question number one, subhead A, is this limited to the book of Numbers, chapter 17?
No, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. It makes sense if this followed what Moses has to say in Deuteronomy, because Moses in Deuteronomy lays out a zillion laws that have not been part of the Torah beforehand. He expounds on whatever was given before. And when they say that you've gone too far, it seems to me that would be reasonable if it followed what Moses has to say in Deuteronomy.
Well, so now you raise a couple of very interesting questions. First of all, if you read the reports of the British election yesterday or Thursday, whenever it was, the part of the labor opposition was to the conservatives, you've gone too far. You know, the austerity program, you've gone too far. You've lost touch. You've lost touch with the people. This is a theme that reappears in American political discourse probably every year, from local elections to national elections. Okay, you've gone too far. You've lost touch. You don't know what you're talking about. Now, the book of Deuteronomy, Chuck, I hope that is Chuck. I'm assuming it's not Nancy, but you could have ripped off somebody's Zoom. The book of Deuteronomy, when you get to Deuteronomy, it itself is a fascinating story because the book of Deuteronomy, which is a 3-sermon summary of the wanderings, it's Moses' farewell sermons. He has to give 3. Be content with one. There's 3 sermons. But the book of Deuteronomy is based upon a discovery, according to classical biblical scholarship, around the year 621 BCE by King Josiah in the basement of the temple to purport and support his Reformation and revolution, religious reformation, in which he railed against the corruption of the cult and set forth a whole series of laws to underscore his religious revolution that failed, by the way. So this idea of challenging authority, because look, the children of Israel challenged Moses' authority and God's authority all the time. So, you know, this is part of the taking a look. Once you step off the stage, the arena of this is ordained, divinely revealed word, which non-Orthodox Jews do, you open yourself up to a whole series of possibilities and be able to have the text la'asok to us from our own perspective. So Chuck is right. This may be a result, since if this is codified in post-exilic Judea, an attempt to deal with you've gone too far. Talk to me about the leadership. Moses and Aaron are being accused of separating themselves from the community because everybody's holy. Everybody's holy. Why do you set yourself up as something more? So which raises the question, do leaders, how difficult is it for a leader to walk that very, very fine line of being the populace to being above? And how difficult is it? Because we're living it. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Because the Torah, this is right out of the first paragraph of Korach right now. You've gone too far. The whole congregation is holy. All the people are holy. Who makes you? Who made you?
Sure. This brings to mind the question that you asked about, which I guess it's like, history is written only by the winners. So
History is written by the winners.
So,
Absolutely correct.
So is it rebellion only when then you lose, and then that's when God's going to punish you? Or if it is an appropriate time to challenge a leader because they have indeed it's become more about the ego? I think then it responds to your question. The first thing that comes to mind is, great, now the Levites are being rewarded with all the tithes and all of because they're following God's word, because they haven't, they've fallen into step with what the leaders want them to believe. And of course, I can't separate out, like you said, we're in July 2024, when you hear televangelists talking about, you need to follow along with me in order for God to be able to, get reap the rewards. So.
Yeah, well, as the book of Deuteronomy and other passages say, be careful of the false prophets.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're everywhere. And especially be careful of the false prophets who, start holding up the Bible and quoting biblical texts. Because as we've discussed, you can prove, if you know how to play the proof text game, you can prove anything you want by quoting a passage in the Bible. Anything. I mean, anything. Which, as a professor of mine taught me very clearly, anytime somebody does that, you just raise your hand, Saroni, and say, thank you for that text. Could you tell me who wrote it, when they wrote it, what was the social, political, economic, and religious context around that text? And then I can perhaps make an opinion. But if you just say, God said, no, come on. It works if you follow pediatric religion. Pediatric religion is it has an idealized parent. A parent tells you to do this, you do it. But a mature religion, like real Judaism, asks you to doubt, question, argue, and wrestle. That's really one of the things that separates us from several other religious traditions.
But if I could ask, with that in mind, weren't Korach's followers doing exactly that?
Yeah,
Were they doubting? And then look what happened to them. So we're kind of getting a mixed message.
Oh no! Listen, of course. But there is one constant message in all of Torah. You cannot go against the word of God. If you do, you die. Very simple. The God of the Torah God is it's like as it once is explained to me by a Bible professor, it is like a tribal sheik. There is his way or no way. And what's interesting in this passage is that for most of this passage, Moses and Korach have these confrontations and conversations. It's not until I think verse 19 in this chapter in 16 that God enters the text. Moses and Korach are having this, Korach comes to Moses, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. Tomorrow I'll meet you. It's like high noon. I'll meet you at the temple, at the tabernacle, bring your fire plan, and we'll see who God chooses. Remember this, the priests wrote this, they edited this, so we know how it's going to end. If Korach had won, you probably would have had a very different Torah. Very different. So, and it's not until in the middle of this passage, in this chapter, that God enters. Korach gathered the whole community against the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the presence of God appeared to the whole community, spoke to Moses and Aaron, and said, hey, listen, dudes, just step back. I'm taking over now. And Korach and his followers were incinerated. The earth opened up. Why? I have no idea. I have this iPhone that it just talks to me when I don't want it to. The earth opened up, and and they were swallowed. And then there's a second part of the revolution, Dothan and Abiram, and they're also killed. But we'll get to that in a minute. And then I want to share with you a midrash that will. You never get taught this. But first, before we get to this midrash, which basically says the Israelites were coerced to accepting the Torah. And it probably may have been invalid, the whole thing invalid. By the way, we never teach this in Sunday school. Okay, John.
Well, I have to get close to talk. I'm confused that Moses doesn't know at the beginning of this passage that he's close to God and has an advantage. You're saying he doesn't know how it's going to come out?
Oh, no, they know because they wrote it. The priests wrote it.
Oh,
I'm just saying what the interesting thing is, you would have expected after the initial conversation between Moses and Korach, then the passage would have read, and then the Lord came to Moses, or Moses, as he's done previous times, would have then gone to the tent of meeting and talked to God and said, what do I do? Or consulted the Zikanim, the elders. No, he just continues this dialogue as if he knew what was going to happen. All right, bring your fire pan. You want a test? I'll show you a test. I definitely a setup. But the message was quite clear. You don't rebel against God. That's the message. The overriding, anytime, golden calf, Korach, any other time in which there's little rivulets of this throughout Torah, the answer is my way or you die. Any other? What you got, Chuck? Donut? What?
A snack.
Yeah, good. It's brunch time. I mean, for you, it's lunchtime for us, but it's brunch time for you. A lot of you guys out west, so you don't have Dunkin' Donuts. You can go over and but anyway. Here's a very, very interesting twist. Now, and just show of hands, do any of you have on your phone or computer an app called Sefaria, Sefaria? Okay. So if you go, most of us wish we had Sefaria when we were in rabbinic school, because we would never have to do any homework. We would just punch in the text, and we could have just, it would have saved us a lot of money at the Xerox machine and a lot of nights studying. But if you go to Sefaria and click on the Torah portion for today, Korach, and then click on the Talmud, and there's a reference to a passage in the Masechet, in the tractate of Talmud called Shabbat, which obviously are laws dealing with Shabbat. In the middle, and this is page 88 A and B. The Talmud it doesn't go sequentially, it just says the number, and then has a A, and you turn it over, and then it's B, and then it goes to the next number. So like 88A, 88B, the next page would be 89A, 89b. That's how it's numbered in Talmud. So there is a conversation that's going on in Shabbat about the giving of the law and the revelation at Sinai. And the Talmud is a compilation of centuries of rabbinic conversation. And this is from the Babylonian Talmud. We had two Talmuds, remember, the Babylonian and the Palestinian. The Babylonian, modern Iran and Iraq, which had a huge and functioning Jewish community from the exile from the 6th century on, 6th century BCE. Listen to this passage, and then I'm going to ask you how you interpret this. The Gemara, which is the discussion of the law. You remember the Talmud? If you probably have studied Talmud a little bit, you have the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Mishnah is the law. The Gemara is this collection of rabbinic interpretations. The Gemara cites additional homiletical interpretations on the topic of the revelation at Sinai. The Torah says, and Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the lowest part of the mountain. Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chama Bar Chassa said, the Jewish people actually stood beneath the mountain, and the verse teaches that God overturned the mountain above the Jews like a tub and said to them, if you accept the Torah, excellent. If not, there will be your burial. Rab Acha Bar Yaakov said, from here, there is a substantial caveat to the obligation to fulfill the Torah. The Jewish people can claim that they were coerced into accepting the Torah, and it is therefore not binding. Rabbah said, even so, they again accepted it willingly in the time of Ahasuerus, that's the Hanukkah story, as it is written, and the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, quoting a passage in the book of Esther. I raise this midrash with you, this little glimpse of Torah, because here you have in Korach a conversation about leadership and to channel a little bit of Chuck's concerns, the obligation, always used in Torah, to accept the mantle of Torah law. And here you have this very interesting piece of Talmud which says, at the revelation, God just turned the mountain and in essence said, either accept this or die. Which, if you then take a look at Torah, like we have here, if you challenge God's authority, the punishment is death. How do you relate to that now in 2024, non-revelatory? How does this text speak to you in the context of a revolution against entrenched authority in the Torah? Anybody want to hazard a guess? I would assume that none of you has studied that passage of Talmud. But it's a nice little insight into how do you then begin to accept? Because the conversation, there's a huge ongoing conversation rabbinically, especially in the non-Orthodox community, and in the non-right wing of the conservative movement, about halacha and about, have we gone so far afield in accepting anything, any way anybody wants to do anything, that really we need now is sort of like a new liberal post-modern halacha to guide us in this very, very peculiar age of transition. This is a big topic of conversation, and it kind of like moves itself out of this passage. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Anybody? Yes.
Yeah.
Yashim.
Yeah, for me, in this time of change and a lot of fears of, apocalypse and just everything falling apart, this is, reading the Torah and contemplating the message, God's message, that gives me a sense of ability. It changed it because I don't know, it's my personality. I get like, I worry about things or I go all over the place, but it gives me a sense of grounding, a path that makes sense to me as a human, a path that makes sense to me as a human with a certain place in the universe. It just keeps the proportions right and my grounding stable. That's how I interpret it. Does that make sense? Or
Oh, it makes absolutely wonderful sense. I mean, one of the roles of halacha, whether you see it as revealed religion or not, is that it gives you that sense of grounding. It gives you a foundation. My actions and my role as a human being are based upon this cadre of beliefs and values and morals. The challenge is whether
yes.
you, Yashim, see this as a product of a revelation of a supernatural being, a God, or something that has evolved over time, and that these speak to you and make sense to you, which then raises the question: how flexible are that? And remember, there's a misperception on the part of many people that Jewish law halacha is non-changing, and it's constantly changing. I mean, that's the Talmud. It's an attempt to take the invention of the oral law as opposed to the written law. So the Talmud, that passage that I just read to you, is part of what we call the oral law. And it can be found and you can weave, if we had a lot of time, you could weave a wonderful sermon about that little passage. For example, Yashim, in your study of Jewish texts and traditions, whoever felt it was forced upon you, or do you feel that it has been a natural evolution of your growth as a human being, that you've come to appreciate certain values and morals more than perhaps at this stage than you did when you were 13 or 20?
Well, Rabbi, for me, it's very unusual because I was basically born to parents who are atheists, who are, the children of people on both sides, actually, who were forced to accept, convert, or forced to accept, like at the end of the Ottoman Empire, in my grandfather and grandmother, great grandmother's case from the maternal side, they were forced to accept Islam to survive.
Right.
So I went through this whole period of, this whole atheist, it's not even secularism. It's a denial of the beauty of the divine connection. So I had to go through several stages for me to differentiate myself and attach myself to the beauty of the Torah, to the beauty of God's message, and find my divine connection, reestablish it myself. So for me, it's a very different kind of answer than probably most who've been raised within Judaism, even though I have, matrilineal descent of Judaism, and on my father's side too, on his father's side, I still did not grow up with the joy and the comfort of that connection. So for me, it's a very, very important connection in that way. As how should I say, as enhancing my ability to live as
Ah,
a, yeah, that's how I see it. And to live morally and faithfully and in good faith and hope. So there's a lot of elements to it for me that is very, very important. And I'm just so relieved I could come to this stage at this point in my life, because there are plenty who still question, who still, they just can't connect. Their connection to the divine is broken. And to me, that's one of the saddest things that could happen to somebody.
well,
Yeah.
remember I think I'm not an expert in this at all, but the root meaning of religion from its inception, I think from the Greek, really means to bring people together. This is why in Judaism, community is more important than theology,
Yep.
which we also rarely teach you. But if you were able to go to almost any synagogue and ask them, do you believe the words that you read in the prayer book? Actually believe them, that they're 100% true. I will tell you point blank, because I've asked this question at almost every congregation I've taught at, my own and others for my Jewish sacred agent work. The majority of people say, no, I don't believe those words in the prayer book. Then when you say, well, then if you don't believe the words you pray, why are you there? And the answer always comes back, because this is my community. This is where I find nurturing, definition, substance, connection, because we are fundamentally alone, which I believe. The power of and look, Temple Aaron is a living proof of this. You have people spread out all over, right? But yet there's something that connects you. And it may be a different type of connection for different types of people, but the connection is there. And the community is there. This is why there's so much still conversation about what we're doing now, the Zoom community, as opposed to sitting in shul or sitting in a room, seeing other people and being part of other, connecting with other people. And now we've created post-pandemic, a whole different level of community, an electronic community. And now you have electronic synagogues. I have two friends of mine who this morning, it's 12:30, a little past 12:30 here on the East Coast, but they're just now finishing Shabbos morning services at an electronic synagogue. People Zoom in from all over, and they're very comfortable with it. They love it. They love it. And when you say, but it doesn't, you're not sitting in shul with the people. They say, that doesn't matter. I've gotten over the course of these 2 years of, I see these people, I understand them, we talk, we have little breakout. This is part of my community. And now, given the wholesale change in the Jewish community in America, there are many different types of these communities. Many different types of these communities. This is why we're in this tremendous age of transition within American Judaism, because of a whole bunch of things. Anybody else want to comment on what Yashim was talking about, or how these texts are speaking to you? Anybody? Once, twice? Okay, I hope not everybody's asleep.
Hello,
Who's this? Bunny?
this is Bunny.
Oh,
One, I want to thank you guys for letting me join. And as far as community goes, I just wanted to say two things. For me, after 2020, I felt like more people that I had conversations with about Sabbath, more people were more welcoming to me. I've mentioned that a couple of times because I've been a Sabbath keeper over 30 years. And now,
Bunny, you're breaking up. I don't know whether you can hear me. This is one of the challenges of the electronic community. Bunny, can you hear us? Can you hear me? Or did you freeze?
hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were breaking up before.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're okay now. I can hear you now. Yeah.
I turned off the video. Maybe that helped. I am not Jewish, but I'm a Sabbath keeper of 30 years. And I was saying that in those 30 years, I never felt in having conversations, just bringing up questions, a sense of welcoming that people wanted to share some of that information with me.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I found Safaria. It really has helped me. I love it immensely. It allows me to do comparisons. And I think what was really exciting was that I also found different interpretations on the site, right? That there are different Torah's,
Oh yeah.
like different Bible. I
There's
didn't know that.
tons of different translations.
Right. And so for me, right now, I'm feeling a lot of inclusion and a lot of acceptance and welcoming in the community from people like Yashem, who invited me today. I think right now I'm having some difficulty because I've done my best with my children to follow Sabbath and not shop or go out and do all that stuff. But I find even my sister, who is Jewish, a lot of those people don't tend to do that, that they've kind of made excuses on why it's okay. Like I can go today or do this today, and it's really difficult for me. The one woman that taught me this over 30 years ago, she always reminds me that you can't make God make adjustments for you. So Sabbath is Sabbath, but reminding me that Sabbath was meant for man, not man for Sabbath. I don't try and work around with that because I just want my kids to know, do your best not to be out on Sabbath, be buying stuff on Sabbath, shopping, eating, doing all that stuff. So I guess my question is, I don't know if I'm supposed to not do it the way I have not been doing that, or has that changed?
Well, the answer to your question, here's a good rabbinic answer to your question. Yes to both. So
Okay.
let me try to explain this, because we only have like 25 minutes left. I got some great new other texts I want to share with you, but I don't want to duck questions. There is Bunny, there is a real movement now to recapture a sense of Shabbat on Friday night and Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of American Jews, non-Orthodox, do not observe Shabbat. That's a blanket fact statement. Take it to the bank. But there's a growing number of people of all generations who are saying, to really almost like to channel a little bit of what Yashim was saying, I need and I want some sense of structure. The world is so unstructured and frightening that if I can bring some sense of discipline into my world, and here I have a religious tradition which says, yes, from the beginning, even though we stole it from the Babylonians, the idea of a Shabbat, the idea of rest, which is a theme that goes through the Torah, land, everything. And while I am not a halachic Jew, in other words, and to shut everything down from Friday night to Saturday night, but I will start making some adjustments. I have a lot of colleagues and a lot of friends of mine, a lot, that's rabbinic hyperbole. I have many colleagues and some friends who will go dark on electronics from Friday night to Saturday night, as if to say, this is such a controlling medium that for one day, I'm going to take this and put it in the drawer and just not do it. There are people who will say, I will dedicate Shabbos morning. I will go someplace to do some Torah study, either electronically or my own synagogue if they have it. In other words, they create their own approach to Shabbat.
Right.
We even have, Bunny, I had a professor at the Hebrew Union College when I was in the seminary, Dr. Reines, Oliver Shalom, who looked at this at great length. And you can probably Google him. I don't know whether it will explain this fully. He created this thing called polydoxy, but he really basically said, given the United States of America's community, not everybody can take Shabbat off, Saturday off, for a variety of very valid reasons.
Right.
So if you can say, I can carve out that day from Tuesday afternoon to Tuesday night, that's going to be my Shabbat. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to focus on this. Then that's your Shabbat. He got into a lot of trouble with this. But the reality is, I know people who do that. Said, I got to work on Saturday. I got to work on Friday and Saturday, and said, I got to work. But, Thursday I can take a day off, and that's my Shabbat. So the question, then becomes, is the actual letter of the law more important than the spirit? And that's an individual choice within our community. So that's why the answer to your question, Bunny, is both and, or yes and. So
Okay.
and more people are really trying to contemplate how to do that, because they understand as we get older the value, and all the literature supports this, the value of taking that time and trying to refocus and readjust our own mental approach to living, especially in this day and age, which is very, very frightening. Very frightening. Okay, so
Yeah.
Temple Aaron of Trinidad. Boy, where are you?
In Florence, Colorado.
Italy?
Florence, Colorado.
Oh, I was going to say you
It's
should have brought
almost like being in Italy, but a couple thousand miles, 5,000 miles away.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly, living by the letter of any law has always been a little challenging for me. And I find as I've gotten older that many letters of the law are, they're man-made letters.
Oh, yeah.
If Adonai wants us to honor the Shabbat and mandated certain specific do's and don't not to do, I just don't believe that we have to live in such a restrictive, required presence.
Well, that's why I wanted to share with you that piece of Talmud, so you could raise the question if you do something Jewishly from the moral and ethic, if you feel coerced in doing it, is it valid? If you approach this from your own neshama and say, I've looked at this, this is what I want to do. This really makes sense to me, because it gives me that sense of, as Yashim was talking about, a sense of grounding, sense of direction, a sense of purpose. I don't feel coerced in this at all. I feel this is coming from my own conversation with God, so to speak. Well, that's a different, so you're right. It's and I have found a lot more people as we get older, for a whole variety of reasons, are more comfortable with having this conversation with, what the hell does all this mean and how can I make sense out of it? And in my terms, not living. I think I put this on the website this week on the Torah commentary. Not living as somebody telling me or defining my life, but really defining my life for me, which is a type of revolution for many people.
Yeah.
But that's another gift of text study and Judaism. Go to what time is it? Oh, gotta hurry up. There's two more texts I just want to share with you real fast. Get your opinion on this. Hello? Okay. Chapter 16. This is from the test with the fire pans and everything. This is right before Korach gathers the whole community against them in the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the presence of God appeared to the whole community. This is verse 20. And God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, stand back from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant. Now, you would have expected Moses and Aaron to say, hey, go for it. They've challenged us. They're wrong. Go for it. But look at it. But Moses and Aaron fell on their faces and said, O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? What does that mean?
Last night, the rabbi at Temple Albert said of the rebellion that maybe the leaders for thinking one way, but that it's in the nature of people to be kvetching. You know, if everything's not perfect the way they want it, so they're kvetching. But that doesn't mean that they know exactly what the leader is saying or go along with what that person's saying. But they're just, it's in the nature of people to do this all the time, to be kvetching, because everything's not perfect.
Well, at least in Judaism. I mean, we raise it to an art form. Are you members of Congregation Albert?
Yes.
Is Harry Rosenfeld still around?
No. Well, he's Rabbi Emeritus.
No,
but
I know, but is he still in the community?
Yes.
Oh, okay. If you ever see him, tell him Richie said hello.
Will do. He's actually doing our Torah study next month.
Is he really?
Yes, he is.
Tell him I said hello, and he's a good guy, and
Yeah.
it's good to know that. I'll tell my friend Kotak, because anyway, it's a long story, not worth right now.
Mhm.
So the kvetching thing, but go back to this, what is Moses and Aaron, instead of saying, all right, go, they kvetched enough, they're challenging my authority, kill them, which is challenging your authority. If they're challenging me, they're challenging you. But what Moses, but look, they ask, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? What does that mean? What does that mean? What's the question that's being asked? Oh, in the interest of time, I'll give you a hint. Go ahead.
Are you going to punish everybody for the sins
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the-
yeah.
Yeah.
So here, in other words, you're going to kill the people who are involved with this revolution. I got that, and that's okay with me. But are you going to continue to punish the children of the children of the children just because these guys really screwed up? Here you have one of the interesting conceptions or changes within Judaism, which went from corporate responsibility to individual responsibility, which is really what this little verse is also talking about. That in the early Torah verses, there is a concept of corporate responsibility. The sins of the parents are going to be visited upon the children and the children. If you remember that verse.
Yep.
Post-exile, Judaism's theology changed to individual responsibility. Okay, if your mom and dad screw up, that's on them. You're not going to be blamed. You cannot, their sin does not carry over to you. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a huge change.
Oh, it's a huge change.
From even early Torah,
Absolutely.
where God condemns Canaan because of the acts of his father,
right?
In uncovering
the nakedness, right?
Yeah. So that's a huge change.
It's part of the change in Judaism that takes place as a result of the Babylonian exile. If we ever do an adult education, I think I wrote somebody about, I remember who, if you wanted to do something next year, but there were 4 or 5 major total restructurings of Judaism in Jewish history, where the religion changed. It either changed or it died. It disappeared. The Babylonian exile was the second of these major innovations. And part of that theological perspective was this shift from corporate responsibility to individual responsibility. Yashim, you had your hand up.
Yes, I was just thinking, it just occurred to me that it's also the liberation. Individual responsibility is a form of liberation from a time of slavery when, there was no ability to, I mean, this is in the political structure and the economic structure, the oppression of slavery. It occurs to me that it is it's a path of liberation rather than being judged and punished for being a part of a group of the oppressed. So that's how.
And now you've opened up, if this was the high holidays, see, you could preach a sermon based upon the Akedat Yitzchak, which you read on Rosh Hashanah, of the
Yeah.
sacrifice of Isaac, of really what it means to be free.
Yeah.
And there's a whole long conversation, but that's why that passage is read every year, because it is so powerful. And just because what you were talking about before, there's a whole series, I think it's a book called My Father's Wells by a scholar named of Pitzel, who's understood that the binding image, the binding of Isaac on the beer in Genesis 22 is part of the acceptance of freedom, because just as Yashin was talking about, in order to be truly free, we need sometimes to accept certain restrictions on us.
That's right.
If everybody did what everybody wanted to do, when everybody wanted to do it, you'd have chaos. So if when you're driving, you have a red light, which for most of the country means stop. Because if you choose to say, screw it, I'm a free person, I'll do what I want, there's a good chance you could die or hurt somebody. That's true in most of the country, with the exception of South Florida and Massachusetts, where that light is just a suggestion. For those of you who have driven in, never mind. But we accept limitations in order to be free. Other than without that, you have chaos. And the true freedom, and you know people like this, who are constantly enslaved. And there's a midrash, a series of midrash. I have it in a book at home because I'm not at home. In Tversky's Living Each Week, or Living Each, I forget which one of his books, but he really talks about the idea that the slave master is also enslaved to the system. And to be truly free, you have to be able to cast away, break those bonds of slavery, theological, spiritual, emotional, psychological, in order to live your authentic self. But it's very, very, very difficult. And the genius of the Jewish religious system is it says you have the right to do that. You have, even with God, remember Exodus 3? Oh my God, I'm reading out of time. It's non-translated in a lot of the new translations. It means you have the permission, the freedom, the right in Judaism to create your own definition of what Adonai Echad, that one God, that concept of monotheism is. In fact, not only the freedom, you should be doing it. You should be wrestling like Jacob every day. Because the God that go ahead.
I was gonna say, but I go back to the text, and actually by the end, I found myself feeling sympathetic for the rebels, because it felt like, to your point of, is this about ego? That at the end of the day, Moses and Aaron, they really walked away from this particular portion. It was just reinforcing their authority and their divine gifts. So,
which is why I raised the question: if Korach had won, you'd have a different Torah.
Right. So it's who's interpreting who are we declaring fealty to at the end of the day, and who is interpreting what that is supposed to be, and then the ability to be able to question. It's the Goldilocks principle. I want a leader that is also inclusive. I want it both ways.
Oh no, listen. When I was running the region, when the union had regions, and I would sit with a search committee who were looking for a new rabbi. And I eventually I would walk into the meeting, and we would all the pleasantries, and I'd say, well, it's good to meet you. The search committee of Temple, whatever. I know exactly what you want. And they would say, how do you know? I said, you want somebody who's experienced, but not too old. Somebody who can relate to the younger people, but also the older people, who's a great teacher but doesn't preach too much, who gives great bima, but not and not to the point of excluding people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they would all say, yes, that's exactly what we want. And I would turn around and say, good, because that person doesn't exist. Never. Okay. So now that you understand that person doesn't exist, now we can begin to talk about really your culture and what fits best for you at this particular period of time. And it never failed. Okay. I just want to mention one more question. This to me, this is a great, what was the Donna? It was Exodus 3. Moses in the burning bush, and he asked for a name because God said, go to Pharaoh, and Moses says, I just can't go to Pharaoh to say let my people go because a bush told me. And so the answer is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, which in the old translations was translated I am that I am. In a lot of the newer translations, cross-denominationally, it's left untranslated because the implication is it's future-oriented. I'm going to be what you want me to be. I'm going to be what you make me to be. I'm constantly evolving, which is a great if we're ever together around Exodus 3, we'll unpack that. But I want you to get just real fast. Oh, I only have 4 minutes. Okay, real fast. At the end, there's the second part of this revolution with Dathan and Abiram also ends in tragedy because it's and classical biblical scholarship sometimes says what you really have here is the merging together by the redactors of Torah of two different texts of revolution, two different texts of strands of stories that were combined. And here you have in chapter 17, verse 8, Moses and Aaron reached the tent of meeting. This is the second revolution. God spoke to Moses saying, remove yourselves from the community that I may annihilate them in an instant. They fell on their faces, just like chapter 16. Then Moses said to Aaron, quickly, take the fire pan and put on it fire from the altar. Add it incense and take it quickly to the community and make expiation for them, like in Yom Kippur. Do this ritual and it'll absolve them of their sin. For wrath has gone forth from God. The plague has begun. The plague killed the second revolution. Now listen to this. Aaron took it, the fire pan, as Moses had ordered, and ran into the midst of the congregation where the plague had begun among the people. He put the incense and made expiation for the people. He stood between the dead and the living until the plague was checked. Would never teach you this verse. He stood between the dead and the living. Now I'm teaching a class at a seminary on pastoral care, pastoral counseling, and I assigned this text to the class for this week because a chaplain and a clergy, and a rabbi and a cantor sometimes goes into a situation where they have to stand between the dead and the living. I would venture to say there's 14 people here that some of you may have been in a situation where you have had to stand between the dead and the living. What did that mean? Anybody want to hazard a comment on that before we have to end? It's a really unbelievable image that Aaron, trying to assuage the plague, stands between the dead and the living. It's a magnificent image. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Hazard a okay. Yeah, go ahead, Yashim. It's
I'm
yours.
sorry for talking all the time,
No,
but
no.
yeah,
Go
it's
ahead. Go ahead.
there are two ways of interpreting this. One is for me, like doing, and I've been a relief worker. I worked in the Congo. There's a sense of like children dying, and you have to get the nutrition to them so that more children won't die. And then you're sort of tasked with this idea of planning how to save the living. So that's one way of thinking about it. But for me, the other way is a spiritual way of saying, how do I see myself between, you know, the problems of the past, the fears and worries of the sort of like, even in my, what I explained about like my own, you know, religious sort of upbringing or lack of it, and then what I feel now, that sense of trying to make sense of what comes before me and what could go after me, with me into the future. So there's the spiritual way of doing it for me, of looking at it, and that other way of like being like a relief worker when people are dying. So that's how I see it.
Don't we stand between the living and the dead every time we go to a shiva?
True.
Absolutely. That's why I love this. That's why I wanted to share this verse with you, because I think once you start thinking about it, there are people right now,
Yeah, temple here. I'll start talking about it here.
some of you may know some of these people who are literally at the stage of their life where they are standing between life and death. Especially given medical technology and longevity. And I just want to leave you with this verse, because if you can, just let it wash over you. Let it speak to you. And try to understand, or try to interpret in your own way. What does it mean to stand between life and death? Not only in the Shiva, people with Alzheimer's, people with dementia, people who are workers who go into situations, who literally have to do triage, and literally do triage and standing between life and death. It's an unbelievable image that this little verse has. Unbelievable image. It's 1:02, at least here, which means it's 12:02 wherever most of you are. Sherry, thank you again. I will see you. I think I'm scheduled again in September. So all of you, thank you for your contributions as usual. You guys are great. Shabbat Shalom. Stay healthy, stay cool, stay safe, and see you in September.
Well,
Thanks,
Rabbi,
Rabbi.
thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's
Bye.
always lovely when you teach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. You take care,
Shabbat
guys.
shalom.
Thank you all for
Bye.
coming
Bye.
today.
Mm,
Good to see
Thanks all.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.